Before we start today's lesson, I'd like for you to have a think of your answer to this question. Why do you think footballers wear studded shoes? So hopefully you've had time to think. And here's your answer. The studs on the bottom of the shoes create a really high amount of pressure and they sink into the ground. They do that because they have such a small surface area on the bottom of those studs. They're very thin. So it creates that high pressure, they sink into the ground, and it gives the shoes more grip for footballers who would otherwise slide around in the mud. So this is where we start today talking about pressure. And we're looking at pressure in solids. Today, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to calculate pressure. So there is an equation and you will need to be able to substitute values into that equation to calculate pressure, and also consider which situations you would need there to be a lot of pressure or situations where there would need to be not a lot of pressure at all. You're also going to try and do a practical at home where you can try and find the pressure that you exert on the floor when you are walking. So we've looked at the idea that footballers' shoes create a high amount of pressure so that they can sink into the ground. But what about if you are walking on snow? You wouldn't actually want to sink into the ground. How would you be able to make it easier for yourself to walk on snow? Well, I don't know if you've got this right. You would need something that is wide and flat, creating a really large surface area, the complete opposite to football shoes. So because they're wide and flat with a large surface area, there's less pressure on the ground, and when you are walking, you will not sink into the snow. So now we've got a scenario where you want high pressure, your football boots, and a scenario when you want low pressure, which is walking over the snow. So you can use snowshoes. So if you want to calculate pressure, we need an equation. Now this equation you will have to learn and memorize when you get to GCSE, but you don't have to do that at the moment. So pressure, what it actually means is how much force you are exerting over a certain area. And so far we've been talking about a large area and a small area and what that means for our pressure. Our pressure is measured in newtons per meter squared. So how much force in newtons over an area measured in meters squared. That meter squared, newtons per meter squared for our unit, is also called pascals. You may also know some other units of pressure. For example, if you ride a bike, you might know that on the side of the tyre, it tells you what pressure your tyre should be blown up to, and sometimes it says on there PSI. That stands for pounds per square inch. It's essentially an old unit which we don't really use much anymore, especially not in science in the classroom at school. You might also see pressure in units of bars, so a couple of bars of pressure, also something that we don't use in school. So there are other units out there. So in school we use either newtons per meter squared or pascals. So the equation, make sure you write this down, pressure is force divided by area. And you're going to have a go at using this today. So that force is measured in newtons, the area in meters squared, and pressure in newtons per meter squared, or pascals. Pascals is a capital P and then a little a. PA for pascals. So pause the video and make sure you have this information written down. Going to have a go now. Make sure you've got a calculator. You're going to have a go at calculating the pressure in these 4 different situations. And you are going to assume that you are a student who weighs 500 newtons. So that is the force that you will be exerting on the floor. Now imagine you're wearing these 4 different shoes: football boots, snowshoes, school shoes, and stilettos. So calculate how much pressure you would be exerting on the floor by wearing those different shoes with different surface areas. Off you go. So hopefully you've had a good go at that. Let's check your answers and see if you've got them right. Question 1. Pressure is force divided by area. 500 newtons divided by an area of 0.3 meters squared gives you 1,666.6 recurring pascals. I've just rounded that last bit up to 0.7. Snowshoes, the force is still 500 newtons. Area is now 2. 500 divided by 2 is 250 pascals. Shoes, 500 newtons divided by 0.8 meters squared is 625 pascals. And finally, stilettos, 500 newtons divided by 0.1 meters squared is 5,000 pascals. Well done if you've got those all correct. What you're going to have a go at now is finding your own personal pressure just by looking at the area of your feet. So this is something that you can do at home. You need a pencil to draw around your feet. You need a grid paper, which is attached to this homework task. And you need some scales to find your mass. So if you have a printer, you can print off the grid paper. If you do not have a printer, this is fine. You can make your own. All you need is a ruler, and you need to create centimetre squares on your piece of paper. I will upload a video showing you how to do this. So the method, what you need to do is you need to place your foot on the grid paper and draw around it. Then need to count how many squares make up your shoe print. So rather than counting them and losing track, you could shade in each square as you count them. You could put a number into each square as you count them. You will find that because your foot is not a complete rectangle shape, you will find that you will be counting up halves of squares or quarters of squares as you go around the toes and around the edges. That's fine. Again, you just need to keep track of how many squares you are adding together. Once you know how many squares make up your shoe print, this is now your area, but it's in centimetre squared because it's a centimetre square grid. You need to change this into metre squared. The way to do that is to divide how many squares you've got by 10,000. So make a note of that. Divide how many squares you have by 10,000. That is now your area in meters squared. To find the force that you exert on the floor, you need to find your weight. If you have some scales at home, maybe in your bathroom, if you stand on them, you can find your mass, but you don't want it in stones and pounds. You want to find it in kilograms. So let's say, for example, that you have a mass of 60 kilograms. If you want to find your weight in newtons, all you have to do is multiply it by 10. That gives you your weight in newtons. So if you are 60 kilograms of mass, then you would be 600 newtons in weight. Finally, you can work out your pressure using your force that you've just found from your scales and multiplied by 10, divided by the area of your feet. Now, one thing that I haven't put on here is that you need to make sure that you multiply your area of 1 foot by 2, because you have 2 feet. Once you've done this, it would be great if you could upload some pictures of your foot tracings so that I can have a look and see how you've done. Finally, in your books, I would like for you to draw out a table with 2 column headings, 1 high pressure and 1 low pressure. And then sort the following objects or scenarios into whether you think that they need high pressure or low pressure. Pause the video and have a go. And let's see if you've got them right. So high pressure, you should have had scissors, football boots, biting an apple, a needle, and stapling paper. Low pressure, it's skiing, tractor tyres, camels, and snowshoes. Well done if you've got them right. So today we have learned that pressure is measured in newtons per metre squared, or pascals. You find your pressure by taking the force in newtons and dividing it by the area in metres squared. The smaller the area, the greater the pressure, and the larger the area, the smaller the pressure.